Yeah, we got those tropical notes, some bright acidity that's gonna cut through some of the stronger flavors in the hwangtae and the todok, harmonize on their intense level, and just kind of ride it out.
The United States and Iran have been presented with a proposal to halt hostilities, one that could take effect as early as a Monday and potentially lead to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, according to a source familiar with the plan. President Lee Jae-myung has called for accelerating a sweeping overhaul of South Korea's economic and industrial structure, aiming to reduce its vulnerability to external shocks and geopolitical risks, as Seoul intensifies diplomatic efforts and explores alternative routes to secure oil supplies amid disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. Fierce political clashes carried into a second day of government questioning on Monday, shifting focus to the economy, particularly the fallout from the Middle East conflict. We begin with the latest on the conflict in the Middle East. The conflict between Washington and Tehran is reaching a critical boiling point as a U.S. proposed deadline approaches. Now, according to sources, a new peace proposal may be on the table, but a breakthrough remains unclear. Our Jung Hae-rim starts us off.
The United States and Iran have both received a framework for a possible ceasefire agreement, according to Reuters, raising hopes for a pause in hostilities. The proposal outlines a two-stage plan, starting with an immediate ceasefire, followed by a comprehensive agreement to be finalized within 15 to 20 days, reportedly pushed by Pakistan. Pakistan's army chief has been mediating through the night, directly contacting U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. However, when approached, Pakistan provided no comment. Iran has rejected the proposal, with an official telling Reuters on Monday that Tehran will not reopen the critical Strait of Hormuz in exchange for a merely temporary ceasefire. The official stressed that Iran completely rejects being pressured by deadlines, claiming Washington lacks the genuine readiness for a permanent end to the war. Earlier on Saturday local time, President Donald Trump took to his Truth Social platform, threatening to rain, quote, hell on Iran if a deal isn't reached to end hostilities and reopen the Strait of Hormuz by 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. He warned of further military strikes targeting Iranian energy and transport infrastructure if his terms are not met. Adding to the friction, Tehran is now classifying Washington's threats as illegal. Iranian spokesperson Esmail Baghaei stated that simply threatening to strike energy and industrial infrastructure constitutes as a war crime under international law.
Iran's reaction would be one of reciprocating any such attack. Our armed forces have made it clear that in case Iran's infrastructure is attacked, we would react in kind.
He also issued a stark warning to the international community, declaring that any nation assisting the U.S. in these actions will share legal responsibility and be held accountable for crimes against humanity. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Now, led by President Lee Jae-myung on Monday, the government has renewed calls for practical alternatives to strengthen South Korea's access to energy supplies, aimed at building a more resilient economic structure. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin has more.
With the economic fallout from the Middle East conflict now a matter of how long rather than hypothetical, President Lee Jae-myung says South Korea must move quickly to overhaul its vulnerable economic structure.
취약계층의 어려움을 세심하게 살피는 노력과 함께 대외 변수와 지정학적 리스크에 취약한 우리 경제 구조를 근본부터 새롭게 개편하는 경제산업 대전환에도 속도를 내야 되겠습니다.
Presiding over a cabinet/emergency economic meeting at the Blue House on Monday, Lee urged his cabinet to, number one, diversify energy supply routes, and number two, reduce the country's heavy dependence on fossil fuels. The immediate concern is crude oil. Around 2/3 of South Korea's crude oil imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran has closed to most commercial shipping. An alternative being considered is Saudi Arabia's port of Yanbu on the Red Sea coast, which has a maximum export capacity of about 5 million barrels of crude oil per day.
지금 우회 수입할 수 있는 루트가 그렇게 많지도 않고 위험성이 조금 있다고 원천 봉쇄하거나 하면 대한민국 전체 원유 공급 문제에 심각한 영향을 미쳐서 국가나 국민들에게 너무 위협이 크니까 그 균형을 잘 맞춰야 됩니다.
The government says it will resume Red Sea transits by oil tankers that meet, quote, certain conditions, with the foreign minister saying the likelihood of the route being completely blocked or directly targeted remains low. This comes after South Korea issued an advisory last month urging its vessels to avoid the route due to security concerns. On energy transition, Lee called for measures to expand renewable energy use, such as the swift introduction of more flexible solar pricing. The idea is to set lower daytime rates when supply is abundant.
지금 유럽이나 이런 데는 이미 하고 있는 거 아니에요? 에너지 섬나라니까 더 빨리, 더 세게 해야 되는 거 아니에요?
While much of the discussion focused on long-term reform, Lee also stressed the need for swift execution of the government's supplementary budget once it passes parliament. The more than $17 billion package is aimed at cushioning the economy from the energy and inflation shock caused by the war. The National Assembly is set to begin reviewing the government's extra budget bill on Tuesday, with the aim of passing it at a plenary session later this week. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
In the meantime, efforts between the government and the ruling party are underway to actively secure supplies of crude oil and related petroleum products such as naphtha. Our political correspondent Moon Hae-den has the details.
South Korea's government and ruling party are intensifying efforts to secure alternative crude oil supplies amid growing concerns over economic stability and energy security following disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking after a high-level policy consultation at the National Assembly on Monday, ruling party lawmaker An Do-geul said Seoul is engaged in active diplomatic negotiations with key energy producers, including Saudi Arabia, Oman and Algeria, with special envoys led by the Foreign Ministry among the options under consideration. The government is also weighing up plans to reroute South Korean flag tankers through the Red Sea, with up to 5 vessels potentially directed to Saudi Arabia's port of Yanbu. To address immediate supply concerns, authorities are looking to release strategic petroleum reserves, with state-held oil to be supplied first to domestic refiners and later swapped out once new imports arrive. Private refiners are also being supported in sourcing additional supplies from third countries. Beyond crude oil, officials are closely monitoring supply chains for naphtha, a key petrochemical feedstock. A daily monitoring system covering 50 major industries is now in place, backed by measures including export restrictions and allocation controls. While domestic supply appears to be stabilizing, officials warn that managing petrochemical exports remains complex, given the potential for broader market repercussions. On the financial side, the government has earmarked 470 billion Korean won, over $311 million in its supplementary budget to help offset the cost of alternative naphtha imports. This sum currently covers around 50% of the price gap, though the ruling party is reviewing industry calls to raise that to as much as 80%. Structural reforms to the domestic fuel distribution system are also underway. Authorities have agreed in principle to replace the existing post-settlement pricing system, which typically finalizes prices a month after delivery, with a cycle shortened to within 1 week, with further details expected later this month. Officials are also moving to ease exclusive supply contracts, reducing the mandatory purchase ratio from 100% to around 60% to improve market flexibility. 문혜령, Arirang News.
South Korea will closely watch developments around the Strait of Hormuz this week as 26 Korean ships remain in nearby waters. A foreign ministry official said Monday the Middle East situation could reach another critical point this week after U.S. President Donald Trump warned Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours or face major attacks. The official also said Seoul's top priority remains the safety of ships and crew, while also taking into account the position of shipping companies operating in the region. Now, separately, the Blue House denied a media report claiming humanitarian aid was being considered. It said humanitarian assistance is being examined solely to address conditions in the Middle East. The government says it's coordinating with relevant countries, calling for freedom of navigation and the safety of all vessels in the Strait of Hormuz to be ensured as soon as possible. Now, following last week's first day of government questioning sessions on diplomacy and politics, the second day continued with a focus on the economy. Today's debate centered on the government's proposed supplementary budget to support people's livelihoods. Our correspondent An Sung-jin has the details.
Fierce political battles continued through the second day of government questioning sessions, which this time focused on the economy, especially the Middle East's impact on it. The National Assembly convened a plenary session on Monday with government officials, including Prime Minister Kim Min-seok and Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul present. As anticipated, lawmakers from the ruling and opposition parties clashed over the government's proposed supplementary budget, drafted in response to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. The plan proposes spending around 26.2 trillion Korean won, or $17.4 billion to alleviate the impact on the public, SMEs, and businesses in general. The ruling Democratic Party continued to stress its efforts on examining broader measures tied to energy security and the economy by expanding shipping routes, including passage to the Red Sea and diversifying supply sources and regions.
The Middle East situation accelerated a transition toward renewable energy to reduce structural reliance on fossil fuels. We look to expand the diversity of energy types and supply chains to better withstand external shocks.
The main opposition People Power Party argued that key components of the budget proposal, such as subsidies to offset high energy prices and funding for renewable energy projects, are mere cash handouts for electoral purposes.
There are growing concerns that with liquidity already on the rise, pushing through an additional supplementary budget could further expand money supply and put pressure on the exchange rate.
Rising energy costs, prolonged supply chain instability, and the development of chip clusters were also discussed during the session, with lawmakers pressing the government to detail its contingency measures. The supplementary budget will be further scrutinized by the Parliamentary Budget Committee over the next 2 days, with debate expected to continue to the next plenary session this Friday. In the meantime, the National Assembly will hold its last questioning session on social issues next Monday. Han Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In other news, North Korea appears to be stepping up efforts to position Kim Jong-un as the successor to her father, while also advancing its missile capabilities, according to South Korea's National Intel Service. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
North Korea seems to be accelerating efforts to make regime leader Kim Jong-un's daughter, Kim Joo-ae, his successor, according to the National Intelligence Service on Monday. During a closed briefing to the National Assembly Intelligence Committee, the NIS said Joo-ae has recently made appearances in defense-related areas, such as driving a new battle tank with her father. This is seen as paying homage to Kim Jong-un during his own successor period and is aimed at easing doubts about a female successor while strengthening the succession narrative.
What stood out was the shift of the phrase used, from preparing as a successor to actively consolidating her status as one.
The agency also was quoted as saying that the regime appears to be coming up with a new ICBM that can carry multiple warheads.
An engine test to improve a solid fuel ICBM was conducted in late March, with increased thrust and a lighter carbon fiber airframe. It may be capable of carrying multiple warheads, and the agency is closely monitoring it.
The agency also pointed out how the regime is diluting the legacy of previous leaders while maximizing Kim Jong-un's stature by structural reforms. References to the Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il ideology have been reduced, while Kim Jong-un was referred to as the head of state for the first time, reflecting moves to normalize the state through institutional reforms. An expert says this is to show the regime as one of the major powers in global society.
Based on the confidence of having nuclear weapons, Kim Jong-un is asserting that North Korea is not part of a U.S.-led unipolar order, but rather a member of a multipolar system, standing among the ranks of major powers.
Meanwhile, on the war in the Middle East, the agency expected the conflict to enter a lull around the end of April. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
South Korea and France have agreed to cooperate on preserving key cultural heritage sites. The Korea Heritage Service announced on Monday that it signed the Memorandum of Understanding with France's Centre des Monuments Nationaux, or National Center for Monuments, last week, focusing on the conservation of Korea's Jongmyo Shrine and France's Basilica of Saint-Denis. The two sides will expand to expert exchanges and joint site visits, building on earlier cooperation back in 2022. Now, the agreement also comes as the two countries mark 140 years of diplomatic relations this June. South Korea and the U.S. on Monday launched a joint project in Gangwon-do Province to prepare for an underwater search for the remains of soldiers killed during the Korean War. The 4-week project is to prepare for a joint underwater search planned for August, doing on-site interviews with the locals and inspecting facilities before the underwater operation. Officials aim to recover remains and collect evidence of a military transport plane that crashed in November 1952 due to an engine malfunction while it was flying from Gangneung to Pohang. Now, 9 people, including the pilot, were reported missing, and one of the missing was a South Korean soldier. The cabinet has approved a revised law mandating labor law as an official public holiday for all workers here in South Korea. Since its establishment more than 60 years ago, the day was designated as a paid holiday in 1994 for most workers. Certain types of workers had not been ensured a paid day off, including public officials, teachers, and delivery workers. Now, with the change of law, all workers here in the country will be ensured a paid holiday on May 1st starting this year. The National Assembly passed a revision last week. Renowned cellist and conductor Chang Han-na has been appointed new president of Seoul Arts Center, South Korea's largest and most prestigious performing arts complex. Aged 44, this makes her the youngest, as well as the first female musician to lead the institution since its founding in 1987. Jung rose to global fame as a cello prodigy at just 11 years old, later transitioning into a highly successful international conducting career. The Culture Ministry says her decades of global experience will bring her a fresh artistic vision to the center. Now, in other appointments, the ministry named Professor Yoo Min-jung as head of the National Symphony Orchestra and acclaimed soprano Park Hye-jin as artistic director and CEO of the Korean National Opera. BTS has set another milestone in the music industry as their new album has become the first K-pop production to remain atop the Billboard 200 chart for 2 consecutive weeks. Our Cho Young-eun tells us more.
According to the Billboard 200 chart, BTS's latest album Arirang has held on to the top spot. The album earned 187,000 equivalent album units sold in the United States for the week ending April 2nd based on data from Luminate, making it the first K-pop album to retain the top spot on the Billboard 200 for a second week. The album debuted with 641,000 units, marking the biggest opening week for a group album since 2014. It also recorded 532,000 in pure album sales, the highest weekly total for a group album in over a decade. Following explosive first-week sales, the album maintained strong momentum into its second week, surpassing the group's previous 6 releases that each spent 1 week at the top.
Spending more than 2 weeks at number 1 suggests BTS is attracting not only existing fans but also new listeners, reflecting a growing fan base, while strong performances from both the album and its singles further boost their chances at the 2027 Grammy Awards.
The critic added that while many albums topped the Billboard 200 for just 1 week, BTS's expanded fan base has strengthened their chances of staying at number 1 more consistently. The 14-track album includes the lead single Swim, which debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 last week. The achievement places among BTS's growing list of Billboard hits, joining the previous chart toppers such as Dynamite, Savage Love, Butter, My Universe, Permission to Dance, and Life Goes On. With BTS continuing its strong run, industry watchers are now turning their attention to how far the group can extend its historic streak. Cho Young-eun, Arirang News.
It's time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. For that, we have our sports editor, Paul Neate, joining us in the studio. Happy Monday, Paul.
Yes, hello.
Paul, let's begin with football. Son Heung-min is set to score this season in MLS, but I understand he has a lot of assists, right?
Yes, in fact, he got 4 in one match over the weekend, which is, of course, a personal best for him. And they came all in the first half as well. Now, Son started up front for LAFC in their 6-0 home win over Orlando City on Saturday, local time. He set up Dennis Boanga 3 times in 8 first-half minutes to put his side 4-0 up. Before that, 7 minutes in, his cross led to an own goal to give LAFC the lead. He becomes just the 2nd player in MLS history to record 4 assists in one half. It's a fitting response to questions about his aging curve after 2 perceived below-par displays for Korea in March. He leads the league with assists with 6 in 7 matches, and his team lead the league. They are top of the Western Conference, 1 point clear of Vancouver Whitecaps, with 5 wins and 1 draw from their first 6 matches.
I see. Let's move on to baseball now, Paul. Kim Hye-seong has made his first MLB appearance of the season, but after being recalled by the LA Dodgers, right?
Right, he was recalled from the minors and on Sunday featured against the Washington Nationals in an 8-6 win. He was introduced at the bottom of the 8th inning at second base. The recall came as Mookie Betts was placed on the 10-day injured list, and Dodgers manager Dave Roberts said Kim will likely start 2 out of the 3 games in the upcoming series against the Toronto Blue Jays, a rematch of the 2025 World Series, which begins on Monday local local time. Kim is in his second season in the US. Last year he played at second base, shortstop, and center field, hitting 3 home runs, earning 17 RBIs, 13 steals, all in 71 games.
To women's volleyball now, GS Caltex are league champions, right?
They are. They've lifted a 4th championship title, but their first in 5 years. GS Caltex won the 3rd match of the V-League Championship Best of 5 series against regular season champions Korea Expressway Corporation at Jangchung Gymnasium in Seoul on Sunday by 3 sets to 1, 25-15, 19-25, 25-20, 25-20. The first 2 games were won away in Gimcheon. GS Caltex finished the regular season in 3rd, but had enough left in the tank to go on and seal the title. Giselle Silva was named as MVP, scoring 30 points in Game 1, 35 in Game 2, and 36 in Game 3.
I see. And finally, to women's golf, Paul, I understand something unusual happened at the KLPGA domestic season opener. Tell us more.
Right. There were 3 holes in one recorded on the same day, which is a KLPGA record.
Wow.
In the 3rd round of the Siena Open in Yeoju, Gangwon-do Province, in the KLPGA domestic season opener on Sunday, Park Sung-hyun, Lee Ye-won and Go Ji-won all hit a hole-in-one. Park Sung-hyun became the first to do so this season with an 8-iron on the 4th inning. Then Lee Ye-won and Go Ji-won finished. They followed up with consecutive hole-in-ones in the 7th hole. Jeju native Go Ji-won won the title, finishing at 13 under par for her first on the mainland and 3rd title overall.
Great stuff as always, Paul. Thanks for the wrap-up. I'll see you next Monday.
Thank you. Yeah, see you.
We're in for a chilly start to the week. A cold wave advisory has been issued for parts of Gangwon-do Province. And morning temperatures nationwide from tomorrow through Tuesday will drop by around 5 to 10 degrees compared to today. Inland areas will see morning lows hovering near the freezing mark. So be sure to dress warmly when heading outside. Tomorrow, frost is also expected mainly in the inland Chungcheongnam-do Province and Jeollado provinces. So extra care is needed to protect crops. Meanwhile, strong winds will continue through tomorrow morning in the mountainous regions of Gangwon-do Province and northern Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, with gusts reaching around 20 meters per second. Most coastal areas and Jeju-do Island could also see strong winds with gusts of up to 15 meters per second. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 3 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 0 degrees, Jeju at 8 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 13 degrees, Chuncheon at 14 degrees, Busan at 15 degrees. Another round of rain is expected nationwide from Thursday into Friday, but temperatures will rebound again over the weekend, with highs returning to around 20 degrees.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Da-mi. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
The snow is accumulating rapidly. Temperatures are dropping fast, so stay safe out there. Look behind me.
The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Poli Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Kebion by your side, you can become a Kebion master and save humanity like the total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. The United States and Iran have now received a framework for a possible ceasefire, raising new hopes for diplomacy in a war that has already stretched beyond 5 weeks. Multiple reports say mediators, including Pakistan, have presented a two-stage plan calling for an immediate ceasefire, followed by negotiations towards a comprehensive agreement to end the conflict. But major obstacles still remain. A senior Iranian official says Tehran will not reopen the Strait of Hormuz as part of a temporary ceasefire, even as it reviews the proposal. And at the same time, U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that if Iran fails to reach a deal and reopen the strategic waterway by Tuesday evening, Washington could launch sweeping attacks on Iranian energy and transport infrastructure. For a closer look into the latest developments, we connect today to Mohammed Gouda, professor of Middle East economics at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. A big welcome, Professor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kim.
And also joining us is Seung-hoon Baek, researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Good to see you, Dr. Baek.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start right away with the latest news that the U.S. and Iran are holding back-channel talks through mediators like Pakistan and Egypt. So both sides have received a two-stage proposal calling for a ceasefire. Dr. Baek, what are the key elements, remind us, of this mediation plan?
So based on the latest reporting, the mediation plan appears to be two-stage framework. So the first stage is an immediate ceasefire or at least a temporary halt to escalation. And the second stage is a broader negotiation aimed at ending the war on a more permanent basis. So it is believed that Pakistan have been deeply involved in this effort, and both Washington and Tehran have received some version of a proposal that links a short-term pause to a wider political settlement. So the broader package reportedly includes issues such as sanction relief, frozen Iranian assets, security guarantees, and a future understanding on Iran's nuclear trajectories. So at the same time, there's still some uncertainty about the exact structures. So Reuters described one version as an immediate ceasefire followed by a comprehensive agreement within roughly 15 to 20 days, while AP reported another version centered on the 45 days ceasefire before follow-on negotiations. So the core logic is clear, even if the duration is still fluid. First, stop the slide toward wider war. Second, use that pause to negotiate the political and strategic terms of a longer settlement.
So generally, it's the idea is first a ceasefire and then a broader negotiations to end the war. But given that both Washington and Tehran have taken hardline positions on ending the war, Professor Gouda, what do you think explains their willingness to receive and review this proposal right now?
I think we have a classic mix or ingredients for diplomacy. We have a war with no end. We don't have a clear strategic goal at the end of the day. It's not clear what's going to happen tomorrow morning. It's not clear what is the final outcome of this conflict. So I think both sides are willing to receive and review the proposal, not because of their political positions have softened, but because the economic and strategic price actually of rejecting diplomacy now has risen so much. Washington, of course, on the one hand, tries to avoid this escalation and longer and more expensive regional war going on and on. Of course, we need to look at the domestic structure in U.S. and the losing of Trump's, constituency, even among the Republicans. On the other hand, Tehran wants to avoid deeper economic collapse. The regime is just on the survival mode, actually, right now, and threats to regime stability is really enormous. So in that sense, both sides still might be maximalists in public, but privately they are behaving like actors who really understand that the marginal cost of continuing this war is rising fast, and it will be very, very bad for everybody at the end of the day.
Definitely. It's a very costly war indeed. Yes. Now, President Trump, he has extended the deadline for possible strikes on Iranian infrastructure by 1 day from April 6th to the evening of April 7th. Dr. Beck, how much impact do you think that decision had on Iran's willingness to consider this mediation plan?
I think the one-day extension reflects two things at the same time. On the one hand, it suggests that President Trump does feel some burden about moving immediately to large-scale strikes on Iranian civil infrastructures. On the other hand, I would not read it as a consolatory pause, because I see it much more as a reaffirmation of an ultimatum than a softening of the U.S. position. So, in the other word, Washington is not stepping back from the threat. It is giving diplomacy one last narrow window while making clear that the military option is still very much on the table. So I do not think that Tehran would interpret this as a goodwill. It would more likely see it as a final warning wrapped in a short procedural delay.
So tensions are still very high, with Washington reaffirming its ultimatum. But so far, there is no agreement on the proposal itself. We're hearing key issues like the navigation through the Strait of Hormuz and the handling of Iran's highly enriched uranium still remain quite unresolved. Professor Gov't, how significant are these variables for the success of the negotiations?
This is an excellent question. I think, of course, those variables are very significant. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz is considered the economic issue at hand in this diplomacy in the ongoing negotiations, while the uranium enrichment would be the strategic item in this negotiation. So both are the bargaining chips, I would say, of the Iranian regime or the U.S. regime and so on. However, one thing we need to be clear about, this is not the only variables in power here. We need to consider I would say, the background of both negotiators. We need to consider that for Iran, there is a cultural dimension that cannot be underestimated. Iran, the culture is about martyrdom. The Shia culture is about fighting the enemies, about down to a U.S. and so on. So this is a key ingredient of Iranian personality. So I think this is very important to consider when we are talking about Iran. On the other hand, democratic regimes have an Achilles heel, have a significant weakness when it comes to their ability to yield people under a long time for this kind of war that's going on and on without an end in sight. So I think there are other variables in play here, not only the Strait of Hormuz or the uranium enrichment, but I think each side has their own, I would say, his own weight, his own cross that they are lifting when they are going to those negotiations. So I think we need to consider other variables as well, of course, when we're talking about this.
A lot of points of discussion to pursue. But another thing that's quite important, Iran has made a very important statement. It also said it will not reopen the Strait of Hormuz as part of a, quote, temporary ceasefire. Dr. Beck, do you see this as a strategy to use the strait as leverage in talks?
Yes, very clearly. So Tehran now sees the Strait of Hormuz not simply as a shipping lane, but as its single most powerful bargaining chip. So Iran has rejected the idea of reopening the strait as a part of temporary ceasefire because it does not believe Washington is ready for a durable settlement. That means Iran is trying to avoid giving away its strongest form of leverage in exchange for only a short pause in fighting. So this is why Hormuz is so central to the negotiation. From Tehran's perspective, reopening it too early would mean surrendering pressure before it has received meaningful guarantees. So yes, I would say this is absolutely a leverage strategy. So Iran is signaling that the strait will be tied not to a tactical pause, but to a much broader political outcome.
Right, so it's a very critical point right now. The Strait of Hormuz, of course, we're talking about, and the reopening of the strait itself, it's quite uncertain as of this point. Professor Gov't, how would you assess the possible risks for global energy markets and the maritime trade as well?
Well, I think this is something that we're all considering here. I mean, especially economists, I would say. The problem, as what Dr. Peck have mentioned earlier, Iran is at the end of its rope. They are using Strait of Hormuz as, I would say, the main bargaining chip. And this is affecting everything. When we are talking about this kind of strategy, we need to think about three dimensions and three levels of analysis. The financial market level, which is certainly not doing great everywhere. We are seeing volatility. We are seeing unpredictable, of course, uncertainty, unpredictable outcomes of the ongoing warfare and so on. So this is why the prices are going up and down all the time. This is really bad. The second level is the business and investment level, which is when it comes to the shipping companies facing higher insurance, facing freight costs, facing energy, facing also chemical and airlines, fertilizers, having it very hard to being exported or imported. So this is the business investment level. And the third level, and this is the most crucial level, is the macroeconomic level. So at the end, because of all those things together, we will witness sooner or later inflation, slower growth, and trade disruptions everywhere. Of course, we have to brace ourselves here in Korea. Hopefully, the government is now, working fast, trying to solve this issue. But I think we need to be careful. We need to really do our best. I hope we can face this rough time together. I hope things can get better, and I hope we can end this conflict soon. However, we have to remember that even if the conflict ends today, already the damage is done. So we need to think about this.
Definitely. So we'll really have to hope for a quick ending to prevent further damages moving forward. Now, as we've touched upon a while ago, there's another point of uncertainty, the length of the proposed ceasefire. Reports mention it's anywhere from 15 to 20 days or even 45 days. Dr. Beck, how might this duration of the ceasefire affect chances of a successful negotiations or easing military tensions?
So the duration matters a great deal because a ceasefire is not only about stopping fire, it is about whether there is enough time to turn a pause into a negotiating process and negotiating phase. So a very short ceasefire, such as 15 to 20 days, may be useful to stop immediate escalation and test the intentions, but it may be too short to resolve heavy issues like Hormuz, sanction, uranium stockpiles, and security guarantees. So by contrast, a 45 days pause gives more diplomatic room, but it also increases mutual suspicions because each side may fear the other is simply using the time to regroup militarily. Because Trump has mentioned that, they were about to start negotiation, but Trump kind of argue that Iranian says, please give us 5 more days. And he said, no, they are dubious, they are dodgy. So he said he didn't accept it and he just went on the bombardment. So the duration has a trade-off built into it. So a shorter ceasefire may be easier to agree to politically because it demands less immediate trust. A longer ceasefire may be more useful substantively because it creates actual negotiating space. But in practical terms, the most important issue is not just the number of the days, but whether the pause comes with monitoring, guarantees, and credible roadmap to the next stage, which could build a trust strip between the two that really could lead to actual negotiation.
So we'll really have to see how much progress is actually being made during the ceasefire itself. Now, but if the mediation effort actually ultimately becomes a fail to produce an agreement, what kind of military or diplomatic options might the U.S. and Iran consider next, Professor Gov't?
Well, it's a very tough choice. I mean, if I can also, build on what Dr. Peck have already mentioned, I think the main concern that we have here is that President Trump is dealing with such kind of conflict or negotiations as a businessman, more of a policymaker. So this is why we have this strategy of flexible deadlines and moving deadlines and so on. To be honest with you, I'm not a military expert. By all means, I'm an economist. So I don't think we will witness any change in U.S. strategy, even if the deadline was not met by Iranian negotiators. I think we will definitely witness more military escalation. Already we have thousands of U.S. officials and thousands of U.S. military in the region. We have also, many reports coming of some sort of a ground invasion or boots on the ground invasion coming mainly maybe from Iraq. So we'll witness more military escalation. We will witness more economic and strategic pressure on all of us in the oil markets, on the investment markets, on even predicting what's going to happen tomorrow morning. So we have many problems with the economic structures around the world. And also, we will still see indirect diplomacy, like the case of Turkey, like the case of Pakistan and Egypt trying to mediate and so on. Diplomacy will continue from now on. It will not stop until we reach some sort of a deal, So the problem is that we are searching for a deal and not searching for an end. We're not searching for a real result that makes everybody happy. We're searching for deals. And I think this deal mentality might not be great for everyone.
So it's really a concerning situation, not only just for the two countries, but also for neighbors as well. Now, finally, before we conclude our discussion, President Trump has been pressuring its allies during the negotiations, even mentioning South Korea as well. Dr. Baek, I have two questions for you. First, I want to ask, do you think Washington could eventually ask its allies to shoulder a larger security burden?
Yes, they will. Like Trump already kind of started building the the rhetoric, saying that, when the United States is most needed, this support of their ally, but they all just fled and left. So probably President Trump is building the narratives and discourse that he will going to use this as leverage to actually put more burden to the South Korea, like, for example, like military expenditures and, the dividends for the U.S. armies stationed in South Korea, or by using it in order to avoid us to spend more monies on U.S. military bases. He will going to push us to have more, the economic package, the investment deal to United States. So I think after this Iran and United States war ended, we have to be prepared for coming the bills from the United States that they're going to be pressuring us to get more money out from the recent frustration that they have faced in the Strait of Hormuz.
But Dr. Baek, when you mentioned we have to be prepared, how do you think Seoul should respond?
I think for Seoul, the key is to be proactive without being reckless. South Korea should strengthen energy security first. That means diversifying suppliers, using reserves if necessary, and coordinating with Gulf partners. And at the same time, it should stay in very close consultation with Washington so that it is not seen as a passive. But I do not think Seoul should rush into any overt military role that would expose it to a direct regional entanglement. So the best approach is to calibrate one. So contribute to the stability, protect national energy interests, and avoid over-committing beyond Korea's own strategic threshold. I think that is the thing that we could do for now. And for about the future, we should kind of strengthening our collective bargaining power with Japan, and also when we are dealing with Strait of Hormuz, we have to use a multipolarity platform, so we could actually share our burden and economic cost for what we should have to pay.
Right. Thank you so much for those great insights. We'll really have to watch how these things would unfold in the future. But as for now, we'll have to leave our discussion right here. Thank you so much again for your insights tonight, Dr. Baek.
Pleasure is mine.
And of course, Professor Gov't as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
아리랑 TV 창립 30주년을 정말 진심으로 축하드립니다. 우리의 문화를 정말 세계에 널리 울려 퍼지게 만들어주시는